Now that my spirit has been freed from the body, I can say that the earthly world is the most difficult school of all. But no one should want to leave this school of life early. Human experience is the most valuable spiritual training, was one of the otherworldly letters of Basil Wilberforce, who in earthly life was a minister and writer. Basil Wilberforce died in May 1916. He was 75 years old. And 6 months after his death, his spirit began transmitting messages to the living by automatic writing. Thus, Basil Wilberforce not only told mankind about the peculiarities of the transition from the visible to the invisible world, and shared his ideas about where the soul is before birth on earth. According to Wilberforce, this communication also helped him, too, to comprehend the depths of the chasm that separates the living and the dead. In his otherworldly letters, Basil Wilberforce reported that the nature of the transition from the visible to the invisible world was different in each case. Wilberforce recalled that after his death, for some time he did not realize what had happened. He was surrounded by different people. Some he saw quite clearly, others as if in a fog. At that time I did not yet know that I had died. Later I realized that the spirits bound by the mist were my living friends and relatives. And those beings I saw clearly were my dead friends. My dead mother was the first to make me realize that I was now a spirit among spirits. I think it took me about 12 hours from the time I died to realize it, Basil Wilberforce reported. Wilberforce also described how other people's transitions occurred that he had witnessed himself. For example, he described the transition of an acquaintance of his who died at the age of 30. According to Basil Wilberforce, this man's spirit was broken, troubled and hardened because his young life had been cut short so early. Basil Wilberforce reported that he would only be able to speak to the spirit of his acquaintance when he had recovered. In his letters, Wilberforce said that in the invisible world souls receive new names. So when communicating with the inhabitants of our world, Wilberforce asked to call him Philemon. The author of Otherworldly Letters also described his appearance. Outwardly, I appear to be a perfect human being, as I have never been on earth. But in reality my body is only a shell compared to my old physical garment. I live in a body of light whose rays envelope its form. It will be difficult for you to realize this, but we are light and you are darkness, we are reality and you are visibility, Basil Wilberforce said. Basil Wilberforce spoke about whether the dead retain hearing and sight as a means of maintaining contact. Thus, while the vision of those living on earth is limited to 1 octave, the otherworldly inhabitants are able to see more than 2 octaves. At the same time they see only those octaves which are invisible to us. And our sight perceives only that octave which cannot be seen by those for whom earthly life has come to an end. Basil Wilberforce reported that his new sight made him realize how poor he was while he lived on earth. For then he was not familiar with all the graces of heaven, all the splendor of flowers. The inhabitants of the invisible world hear sounds, smell scents, even taste. All these earthly pleasures are almost infinitely multiplied in the netherworld. From the book, Letters from the Beyond, consisting of messages from Basil Wilberforce, we have speech. Mentally I perceive what other inhabitants of our world are thinking. Every thought, every aspiration changes the color and shimmer of our form. In this way others learn all about me, and I learn about them. Here we cease to feel that pain which you on earth call bodily pain. It's a thing of the past. But we have another pain. My body suffers and shrinks when it encounters the currents of the lower spheres, like a heat-loving plant with an icy gust of wind. Basil Wilberforce reported that he is in a sphere of light. The inhabitants of this sphere live in families, communities, groups. Parents and children, other relatives, friends are connected here only if there is love between them. Those relatives and friends who are in the lower spheres, the wicked dwell here, are also cut off from us, unless we seek them out. Our lovers from the higher spheres can always come down to us, no matter how high up they go, Wilberforce noted. In later reports, Wilberforce spoke of how vivid his memories are of the places on Earth in which he lived. Wilberforce noticed that the more he was in the invisible world, the less and less distinct the earthly scenery became in his memory. They gradually fade from mind and memory. Among the questions Wilberforce answered in his letters was also the question of where does the human soul reside before earthly birth? This is a question of experience. And such experience I have not yet had. As far as I know, I have never lived on earth before. But I am sure that I have known and loved other souls. Where it was and when, I cannot yet remember, Wilberforce replied. The author of the Letters from the Invisible World suggested that he had come into corporeal life from an above-ground, spiritual realm of which he retained no memories. Wilberforce said that if reincarnation exists, it does not apply to all souls. Wilberforce explained it this way: even if we assume that those who have not learnt some lesson of earthly life return to Earth, why should those who have completed the process of purification and character building be born again on the planet? For such souls, while in the body, can no longer attain greater perfection. To develop spiritually, you must not neglect your physical body. However, many use it only to expend their vital energy to fulfill the primitive needs of food, shelter, and clothing. You should be aware of the fact that there are actually 12 physical senses in a person. For example, you have a sense that can be called the sense of mass. It is not gravity. You have magnetic and electrical senses. You have a whole range of hidden physical senses that will be discovered in due course. Basil Wilberforce also talked about whether humans have a destiny. According to him, destiny is not determined in the sense in which we understand it, that we have a clear path, that the hour of our departure from life has already been appointed. For example, sudden death, according to Wilberforce, is not fate. It can be avoided. But that does not mean that a higher power is not guiding us all the time. We depart from life when we are ripe, like an apple that falls from the branch when it is ripe. Many who live earthly lives are concerned about the question, is there a point in praying for the bodily safety of their loved ones and themselves? It makes sense, even if you think your prayer is unanswered. In fact, for every prayer you pray, there is an answer. You receive either strength, bereavement comfort, or spiritual help, Basil Wilberforce reported.